explain to you how they're going to do this with regards to the question and the interactive nature of the presentation. So I will turn it over to them, but thank you both so much for being here, and we're excited about this presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny, and we are so excited to be here. As you know, some of you, I am from Rochester, my family's here, and I am so excited to bring this to you today. We are, Christy and I, over these last 7 to 8 months, have been doing this, doing conversations on resilience, of course this, and also we started in JFS Rochester, not with Christy, but I did with stress during the pandemic. We've spoken over 45 times during the last 7 months to different organizations, different companies, and people have really responded well and realized the need for this kind of a conversation. And what I ask of all of you today, before Christy and I introduce ourselves, is really take a moment to think about participating. I will tell you that the groups that we've done this for, who have participated, who have shared things in the chat, who have written down things, even if you don't want to share in the chat, make sure you get a pen or a pencil and write things down, because some of these things are going to be extremely useful as we move forward with what our new normal is. So join us, enjoy, relax, and I think we're going to bring you some really wonderful content. So again, I'm Tally Dolge, I'm the CEO of Jewish Family Service, and I'm going to have Christy, my partner, my incredible Chief Clinical Officer, introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Christy Dean, and I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at Jewish Family Service. I'm also a licensed mental health professional and licensed professional counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist. So I have been working in the mental health community of San Antonio for the past 25 years, starting with some nonprofit work. Then from there, doing a little bit of private practice that led me to working with the military for about a decade. And now I found my way back to nonprofit, where my heart really is. So it's been a very full journey, and it's been nothing but exciting to be working with Jewish Family Service of San Antonio the last almost year and a half, right around.
Yes, and we are so lucky. So I'm just going to give you a little brief overview of JFS Rochester, San Antonio, and tell you a little bit about what we do, because it is different. And I know that JFS Rochester has some incredible programming, but this is what we do. We provide mental health services, social services, and senior services to anyone in need, regardless of age, race, faith, sexual orientation, or economic status. And we are fully right now on telehealth due to COVID-19. We were a little bit more in the office, but we provide individual and group counseling, psychiatric treatment, education training, and senior services. But another thing that we have done and expanded our reach in San Antonio, we have created new programming and new education, just like what we're doing here today. And we are a part of the largest mental health collaboration in the city, where we're taking 6 nonprofit mental health organizations and bringing our all of our services directly into the schools. And right now we're in 3 different school districts and impacting over 24,000 students, their families, and teachers and administration. And could not be more proud of the work that we continue to do during this continued interesting new world we're living in. Okay, so take it away, Christy.
Interesting is right. Today we're here to talk to you about resilience, which I think is a very important topic during this pandemic. Resilience is the idea of being able to adapt and overcome when you're dealing with some sort of adversity or stress or trauma. Some people have the misconception that it means someone who hasn't dealt with difficulties somehow been able to avoid challenges, but it's not at all. It's being able to bounce back after dealing with those challenges. So it may seem to another person that they were unaffected by it, but actually they were very affected by it, but just able to adapt their response and to keep modifying their reaction. We've been researching resilience since the 70s. And so the stuff that we're going to share with you today is very, very well researched, very well documented. The benefits of these resilient habits are extremely well established. When they began researching this concept back in the 70s, they were looking for some way to explain. They had isolated certain risk factors that were common for someone who had a more serious mental health diagnosis or suicidality. And so they were trying to use those risk factors to predict a diagnosis in a young person that was going to develop, to predict someone's mental health situation getting worse or suicidal symptoms beginning to emerge. And they kept getting frustrated and surprised that they were not having success predicting these things because they kept finding outliers. It wasn't consistent the way they thought it would be. And the outliers were these mysterious people that seemed to be somehow invincible, were the words that they used in the research, or invulnerable to the same difficulties, the same stressors, the same risk factors that another population went through and succumbed to a very traumatic response, a mental health diagnosis, all of those things. And so it was something they kept trying to figure out the mystery, and eventually it came down to and trying to figure out what do these people have in common in this group. And it was what they've named the ordinary magic of day-to-day habits of resilience. So little things that done as a habit over time that made just a huge difference in a person's ability to bounce back and recover from the stressful situation.
All right. So as you can see by this slide, change is the only constant. And we're going to talk a little bit about change. And change is the one constant of being alive. We are constantly adapting and overcoming adversity. Everyone here today has survived something. No one is immune to experiencing or overcoming some sort of trauma. So this could be abuse as a child, a death of a loved one, a natural disaster, divorce, homelessness, mental health issues, financial devastation. And let's face it, the last 7 months of this COVID pandemic have left most of us with some sort of lingering trauma. So this is a uniquely stressful time in our lives, but not in the context of our history. Humanity has survived great natural disasters, health crises, times of social change, and adapted and overcome. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the attributes that promote resilience. So these are some of the attributes that people have in common who we see as resilient. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about each one of these and talk about practicing some of these as habits. So one of the big ones here is making connections and building social support. During this period of time, a lot of people are talking about the disconnection. But really right now, what we're doing is finding a new connection as opposed to something that we used to do, as opposed to feeling the connection of being with a loved one. We have all adapted, and especially, I mean, I'm thinking about my family here and the way we've adapted and used Zoom and used these different things to connect. And knowing that this is new, we don't know how long this is going to be for, but understanding the importance of keeping up with this. So another thing is realistic optimism. So a lot of us are like, this is okay, we're great. That's non-realistic at this point. I'm just going to say realistic optimism is coming from a place of where you are personally right now. And also finding your own optimism. And Christy and I will go over that and how to do that. Another one that's very important is avoid seeing a crisis as a catastrophe. I will tell you, as somebody who has spent my life suffering from panic disorder and anxiety disorder, that one of the things that people with an anxiety disorder do naturally is catastrophize. So what we have to do is start to learn to reframe and rephrase things. So especially during this period of time, I've had to really reframe on a daily basis how I need to do things, how I have to go about things in a different way and not see it as a huge catastrophe every day, or else I probably couldn't function the way I would like to. So I also want to talk about accepting change as natural and an unavoidable part of life, and to set realistic goals. We also want everyone to start taking action that will help them face challenges. And we're going to be looking at all of these. And look at opportunities for new self-discovery is extremely important. So one of the things I also want to point out about the attributes that promote resilience, that these are skills that can be developed. These are not skills that we are born with. We are actually learning how to problem solve. We learn about self-awareness. We learn about our own emotional regulation. So realize that right now when you're feeling, I don't feel like I can do this, these are all skills that can be learned and developed. And that, I think, is one of the most beautiful things about resilience. So what I want you guys to do in the chat feature, if you would like, is write one positive thing that has helped you during this COVID pandemic. Or one thing that you are proud that you've either developed on your own. Those are two different things. I would love to see some of these answers because it really will help. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ellen. So your schedule, Zooming with friends. I love this. My pets, great. Taking walks and clearing your head. Family, self-care strategies, painting. Talia, absolutely laughing a lot. That's what gets me through every day. These are all crocheting, being active, standing outside barefoot, painting, reading. Okay, so these are all such incredible, healthy habits that will promote resilience. And what we're going to do after this period of time, I'm hoping one of my incredible director of marketing is on this call and she can write down some of these things and we will be able to compile them into a list and get these out to all the attendees through JFS Rochester. Okay, thanks.
So, as I was saying before, this resilience stuff has been very, very well researched. And it's one of the unique topics that's been of interest to many different areas of study. So neuroscientists have spent some time trying to learn more about resilience, and psychiatry and psychology have tried to learn more about resilience, but so has corporate HR, and so has the military. In my work with the military, it's something that they spend a lot of time talking about and exploring. So over the last 40, 50 years in these decades of research, they have very well documented the benefits of these resilient habits that include being able to sleep better, having less physical pain, having better personal relationships, feeling more connected to your community and part of something bigger than just yourself, an increase in feeling some altruistic helping behaviors, and even new neural pathways in your brain that improve your memory and keep your brain younger. So it fights off Alzheimer and aging effects on the brain. Can you imagine if Tally and I were here to offer you a new medication that we had, that you could take a pill and have all of these amazing benefits with no side effects whatsoever, we'd have people lined up down the block. We'd be able to charge millions of dollars, but we're just talking about really simple daily habits that don't cost you any money and that don't have any negative side effects whatsoever. So I hope that you will be able to kind of lean into the ideas that we're talking about and find one or two that you can embrace in your own life. So these are a few examples of the many, many different habits and daily lifestyle changes that have been connected to people who are more resilient. The research has found these qualities, and these are 5 that we're going to focus on today. There are lots more. We could do an entire presentation just on self-care, and we probably will at some point, especially if this thing keeps going on. But the idea is these are all things that are very simple practices, but simple does not always mean easy. In fact, it usually doesn't. If you think about your workout routine, if you do it one time in a big way and then run in there to see if last year's pants fit you better, guess what? I'm here to tell you they don't. But if you continue to sustain that practice daily over time, small habits over time make a huge impact. And so these 5, overcoming challenges, connection, positive self-talk, optimism, and gratitude, are the 5 we're going to share with you today. And we're going to trade off covering these, starting with overcoming challenges. So one thing that resilient people have in common is they've successfully overcome something in the past. Now, Tally just told you these are skills we can teach you and skills you can acquire. So you're thinking, if I don't have something in my past that I've already successfully overcome, what am I supposed to do with that? We're going to define that quality a little bit more and how you develop it. There's a researcher named Angela Duckworth who defines this as grit, the idea of where passion meets perseverance. Just keep going, don't give up. And you can see where there's that idea that if you're really connected to something and you have a passion about it and you feel connected to the mission or what you're trying to do, then that could be a big motivator to keep you going. You guys at JFS Rochester work with the helping profession. And so you know very well that there are days that you need to feel a commitment to what we're trying to do, a connection to what we're trying to accomplish that gets you out of bed and gets you going again to show up and keep going. And so sometimes that's what keeps you showing up when how we're going to get there can be really overwhelming. It's the why that will keep us moving and keep us stronger. So when you feel like giving up, sometimes it's about recommitting to the meaning of what we're trying to do and thinking about who you want to be. Now, we talk a lot in the mental health world about post-traumatic stress disorder and the idea that you've been forever changed by a difficult experience that you've been through. And that is very, very real and very, very challenging. But there's also something called post-traumatic growth. And that's where you're forever altered by the difficulty and the adversity you've gone through, but you're stronger from the challenges and you have new skills that you've learned by going through this adversity. And they're both very real things that happen. And we're going to get through this together by finding some of those ways to get stronger. So an example that happens in nature that we found when they did the biodome and they created this ecosystem that was very protected, is that it turns out it needs, the trees need wind in order to grow their roots deeper in the ground to anchor themselves. So without that adversity, they would grow to a certain size and then they would just fall over and they didn't have the strength that was gained from the adversity and the wind and the challenges. So that's just a great example of how we have to dig in and anchor ourselves. And these struggles that we go through create strength for us. Another thing that people have in common when they are resilient is connections. So I mentioned that I worked with the military for about a decade, and a Marine once told me that the only difference between himself, the guys that went through this really hellacious difficulty and they were okay, they came out of it okay, and the one next to him who went through the same thing and was just unable to survive and was just really, really broken by it, is that he said, I had somebody to lean on. I had somebody to go through that together. I had somebody to come home to talk to about it. And so having those connections is probably my favorite number one powerful thing that will get us through a difficult time like this. Remember that humans are social creatures. We need to have a sense of belonging. We need to be part of a tribe. We have evolved to work together as a team with others for hunting and gathering and child rearing. And it's a really important part of our experience. I think we've all learned a little about the dangers of social isolation in the past 8 months, as we see what happens when we don't get out of the house and how we're impacted by it. It's an innate need to connect with others. There's a reason that we use the punishment of social isolation in prison, right? That we have solitary confinement as the ultimate punishment for folks. So in mental health, we see the destructive nature all the time of what it does to folks to be too isolated, that they need that connection, but for some reason they sort of sabotage themselves by choosing to be more isolated, and it's really, really destructive. I want to share another story about when I worked with the Air Force. There was a team in the mental health field in the Air Force, and they talked about a leader that really impacted them. And the story was that they had gone through an experience where, honestly, you can really, really count on the military to do the right thing, to take care of its people over and over again. But in this one situation, they had been through something very difficult, and the system just was not allowing them to do what they needed to do to take care of somebody. And they were so defeated by that and just full of hopelessness and looking at each other in this meeting. And they said, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And the woman who was the commander for the mental health group said, we're just going to have to love each other enough to love our way through this, which is not what you would expect from the military commander, but it's exactly the right answer for those moments of hopelessness and despair, that we have to turn to each other and have enough compassion to love our way through this moment in time where there is so much adversity in our communities, there's so much distrust going on, and so much personal stress happening to us physically, personally, emotionally, in every way. We need these acts of kindness. We need these connection in our community and in our families. Think about what we know about an act of kindness. If you have had a terrible day, the thing I will recommend most to you is to go out and do something nice for someone else, because that action triggers a chemical oxytocin and serotonin boost where you just get a flood of positive emotions in your brain from doing something kind for somebody else. But it also triggers the exact same chemical response for the person who receives the act of kindness. And then, even more amazingly, it can trigger the same exact response, or it does trigger the same response for someone who's just observing. So if you go and buy an iced tea on a hot day, sorry, San Antonio, Texas, these are our examples here. We are not relating to you guys with your fall weather just yet. If you go buy an iced tea for a homeless person on a hot day and hand it to the person on the street corner, you get that surge and feel good about doing something kind. And so does the homeless person who feels recognized and human and cared for. But so do all the cars that witnessed you doing something really lovely and nice. So in addition to suggesting that you go and do something kind for someone and watching the ripples of that. You can go find one online if you can't get out of the house at that moment. There are examples. If you go to Act of Kindness and research that, there's beautiful examples online. Start focusing on some of those good things and creating more of them, because the ripples are amazing. The other thing I'll say is that when you can share your story with the struggles you've gone through, it's the same kind of ripple. You're struggling with something and you decide to reach out and tell someone about the difficulties you're going through, then you get that connection of that personal interaction of the person you're talking to. But you also do something for them. They get the connection of being there, listening, supporting you, and it normalizes for other people what you're dealing with. On top of that, then you both have the experience that you're not alone, that there are others dealing with this. I know Tally and I talk a lot about the value of sharing your story, and she's really gotten to live that. Do you want to share a little bit more about that, Tally?
So, of course, when I spoke last time to JFS Rochester, I did share my story. I spend a lot of days and hours talking to people, sharing the fact that I have overcome mental health challenges. I talk about my experience, and I cannot tell you the connection that it's brought me with a whole new group of people these days, that I have been this vulnerable and I was able to share some of the hardest times in my life, and it would help somebody else to share their story. So if you have not shared your story, or you do not share your story, I just suggest that you find somebody close to you. And we're gonna ask you a question in the chat box after I read something about sharing your story, about how you're feeling these days. I think one of the most beautiful things about this period of time that I have found is that people that had never been vulnerable with one another are able to say, I'm not doing okay right now. And they're able to really be honest. And I mean, I see it with my family and I see it with my friends. I definitely see it with the staff members that we work with, that they're able to say, no, today's a really, really difficult day. And what does that do? It opens up a whole other conversation and it brings people together. There's the piece of connection that you may feel like you're missing. And it doesn't mean connection with people that you know as much. It may be somebody else who has suffered the way you have, or has definitely experienced something in their life. So that's one of the things I say about sharing your story. But I found this incredible piece, and at this point, I read this to you, actually in, if you know me, my favorite magazine, and this is by the editor-in-chief of Oprah Magazine, and it's called Finding Hope in Connection. So here is one of the most fundamental truths about being human. We need to be a part of something greater than we are, whether it's nature, or spirit, or community, or family. When we feel part of a whole, we become more whole ourselves. We experience more joy, more comfort, more possibility, more peace. And yet, there is so much disconnection in this world of ours. Even before COVID-19 drove us into isolation, the former US Surgeon General declared that America was suffering from epidemic levels of loneliness. We were less likely to live in a tight-knit community anymore. We stare at our screens instead of sunsets. We're driven by a culture of never-ending directives of get busy. And our country's deep social and political divisions only threaten to further rend us apart. But for anyone who is listening to this and feeling that piercing pain or that dull ache of loneliness and isolation, take heart. Although you may feel like the only person on earth, the great irony is that feeling lonely is one of the most universal experiences. At one point or another, almost every one of us have endured it, whether we've moved to a new city, lost a loved one, been surrounded by people who don't understand us, or who find ourselves staying inside because our life depends on it. The hopeful news is that there are infinite ways to connect. You can rediscover the beauty that surrounds us. You can rediscover the beauty in yourself. You can reach out and offer support to those who need it and learn how to ask for help. You can share your story. You can use technology to expand intimacy and not constrain it. And every time you forge one of those soul-stirring bonds, you put another stitch back in the fabric of our frayed world. It's one of my favorite pieces on connection, and it just really is absolutely beautiful. And I hope that it provides you the hope that every time I read it, a little choked up. So I hope that's what it gives you as well. So thank you for listening to that piece. And if you would like that, or you would absolutely send this to you as well in your own documents, so you might be able to put it up on your wall or something. And just remember about connection. I guess the other thing I want to ask all of you, and if you want to go into your chats, and I see a lot of people are writing, so I want to absolutely talk about what you guys are all writing about, and we'll be doing that at the end. I want to ask you, and again, you don't have to give names, but who do you turn to and share your struggles or challenges? Please write in the chat box. Okay, perfect. We're getting some great answers, and we're going to go over some of these. Moms, sisters, friends, my therapist, well, and my best friend, my sister, my family, my best friends from college, my husband. I love what you just said through prayer. And oh, thanks, Katie.
Aww.
Oh, we love you. Katie's our director of marketing.
Yeah, you need to have a friend you can count on at work, a colleague that you can share when you're struggling. So
Exactly.
very, very true.
So now I'm going to move on for a minute into positive self-talk. So one of the things is that none of us can live up to our own values all the time. So we have all these voices in our head, some would call them self-sabotaging voices. Sometimes they sound like people we may recognize. It could be family members, it could be your boss, but we need to be able to prepare and drown out some of these responses with positive, healthy mantras and the truth behind why and our values. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how self-talk can be so powerful. Do you know that self-talk can work even when we don't believe what we're saying? So I'm going to give you an example from my own life. As somebody who has suffered from panic disorder and anxiety disorder, when I'm in the middle of a panic attack, I can't get my breathing down. I can't seem to get myself to a really comfortable place. If any of you have ever suffered from anxiety, and I know actually at this point that most of us have, we know that feeling where we just can't get ourselves into control. But what we can do at that point is we can be our own therapist. And this is something that Christy has taught me, is to say to ourselves different things. So these are my mantras. It's going to be okay. You can do this. You're strong enough to handle this. And what that does to my body, all of a sudden I relax. My muscles relax. My breathing relaxes. Everything around me seems to go back to normal. And it's because of the positive self-talk that you can do it. This isn't the worst that you've been through. I mean, that's one of my mantras is, you've been through much worse. You're going to definitely get through this. So we're going to talk about our own mantras in a minute, but I love one of the things that Christy has mentioned several times to me, and we talk about this, especially during the difficult times. One of the best ways to tap into your own strength is to say, even and you're going through the hardest time, you can say, I wish this was harder. I just wish this was harder. If you keep saying that, you're going to keep trying. It's really exciting. So try and do that. I wish this was a harder time. You change your thoughts, you change your brain patterns, and especially during this period of time, we want to do that with and negate the negative self-talk. So now it's time to write in the chat, what is your mantra? What are some of the things that you say to yourself? How do you keep yourself going? I know it sounds a little cliche, but we all need something. Thank you so much. This feeling is temporary. Inhale, love, exhale, fear. These are perfect. One day at a time, this too shall pass. I think we all feel like, you know, we may need to actually record some of these thoughts and some of these mantras. And every day you can develop a new one even. So whatever your day looks like, there are things right now, and you know this even on the internet, that they have so many quotes and so many things that may resonate with you. Here are just a few of them that we have used here at JFS San Antonio. So again, you're strong enough to handle this. We don't have to be right. We're here to get it right. I'm loving what's in the chats right now. I love the fact that a lot of you use lines from songs. That's another thing we all seem to do. I tell you, me and my sister do it all the time, and we actually communicate that way. So that's another form of connection and another way that we, you know, I think just a song itself can make us happy, can bring us to another place, can bring us to another time period in our brain. I love this. These are so great.
You guys have such beautiful mantras. I love them. I know we're going to save the chat at the end so that we can share that as part of this too. So another really important part of being resilient is choosing to be optimistic. And I have called myself an optimist for most of my life. And I've met people over and over again that say, oh, no, I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist. Have you guys heard that? Where they describe themselves as a realist, as if being optimistic or pessimistic isn't true, being realistic is true. But actually, both interpretations are true. It's what you're choosing to focus your attention on. It's where you're interpreting and spending your energy. So I want to encourage you to think about optimism as a deliberate decision to argue with that negative, nagging, sabotaging gremlin that lives in our heads that Tally was talking about, that tries to steal your confidence and mess up what you're working on. And you have to learn how to speak louder than that voice and drown out that voice and not give it any air. You, just like Tally was emphasizing, you don't even have to believe it as you're saying it's going to be okay. And you start to physically relax and start to do better just by telling yourself these things, right? So in time, this becomes a habit of positivity, and then you develop this genuine mindset of optimism. We are all wired in our brains to naturally focus on negatives, to fixate on the threats. It's what they call negativity bias. Martin Seligman does a ton of research on this that's really fascinating. But think about how much in life you may dwell on your mistakes. Can anybody remember the word you couldn't spell in the spelling bee when you were a kid? This many years later, we don't remember the 100 words we got right. We remember the one that we stumbled on. So it's just, again, like part of how we're wired. If you think about, you know, the caveman scanning for the saber-toothed tiger as a threat, we're looking constantly for negatives and trying to reshape our behaviors to do better. But what happens is then that steals away our ability to notice and be aware and pay attention to all the many, many positive things that are happening in our lives every day. So if we can just begin to make some changes in how we use our language, then it begins to change our thoughts, our thinking, and we recognize more positive, and we rewire our brains to begin to pay more attention to the positives. It's a really amazing phenomenon. So the idea of changing your narrative or changing your language is something that we really emphasize a lot in cognitive behavioral therapy. So we do something called a reframe. And if you look at over here on the right, this example where you say something negative and say, I can't solve this math problem because I'm stupid. Look at all it takes is adding the word yet, just 3 letters, to say, I can't solve this math problem yet. And then all of a sudden, you're being more kind to yourself. You're being more fair in your assessment of the situation, because they're both true, but one is choosing to focus on it more positively, more optimistically. I can't do this yet. I don't know how to do it yet. I'm not good at this yet. So when you catch yourself using cognitive behavioral therapy, you're monitoring your thoughts, you're paying attention to the language that you're using in your head, and then you begin to change that and talk over the negative gremlin so that you then put a new narrative out there and you say, it's more fair. Am I really stupid? No, of course not. I'm good at a lot of things, but it's more fair to say I struggle with math and this problem is particularly difficult, right? So you're always kind of paying attention to what's going on in that narrative in your brain so that you can catch it and then rephrase and reframe the situation. The last resilient habit that we want to focus on today is gratitude. Basically, the practice of gratitude is a resilient superpower. In just a very few moments of your day, you can really powerfully change how you look at everything the next day and how your whole experience begins to be shaped in the future. So the idea is that you're going to pause and pay some special attention to all the things that you appreciate in your life, rather than, like we were saying, with the negativity bias and that Martin Seligman taught us about, where we're constantly paying attention to that one thing that went wrong, that one slide that I stumbled over in the presentation. Instead of focusing on that, I can focus on all the things that go well, right? So you're actively searching for these things throughout your day, and what they call in the military, hunt for the good stuff, where you are deliberately choosing to be on the lookout because you know you have to recognize them for the future. You can make it a daily ritual using a technique that they call habit stacking. So you take something that you're already doing every day and you tie it together, where you're brushing your teeth at the end of the day before you go to bed, and you use that time to remind you to reflect on something positive that happened today that you really appreciate, something good in your life. We also suggest that you can amplify the effects by combining this with connection. Remember, we talked about how powerful connection is. So if you begin to share the gratitude with others, then it's absolutely exponentially increased. So think about ways you could do that. You could share it with your loved ones around the dinner table by everyone talking about the best part of your day every night. Then you are modeling and teaching this behavior to little ones and to our family members about developing social emotional skills that will make them more resilient in life. You can share it with your partner while you're having your morning coffee and talk about what's something that went right yesterday and who caused that to happen? How did we do that? And how can we make that happen more today? You could share it with your colleague and your coworker about what's something that is going right here and how can we enlarge upon that and make sure who caused it to go well and how can we make sure that that keeps happening. And then my favorite, I really want you to think about writing a note for someone that you really appreciate and sending it to them out of the blue, just sharing a memory of something that was a a time that you think positively about. And this is a time in our history where we need those little pick-me-ups. We need to reach out and connect with each other in those little acts of gratitude. And Tally's got a really fantastic one she's going to share also.
Yes, so during this period of time, I am having trouble and had trouble grappling with things I can and what I can't control. And I can't control the people in the grocery store who, or in, I'll tell you in Texas, who may not be abiding by a lot of the COVID rules. But I wanted to say during the first few months, I was fixated and crazy about what everybody else was doing and not about what I could control. So I decided to actually write every single day since March, 5 things every morning that I'm grateful for in a journal. And I don't need to elaborate on them, but they have to be 5 things, and every day it needs to be something different. It can't be that you write every single day your family, your family, your family, your family, your family. That doesn't really, it sort of defeats the purpose of what being grateful for. So I have to tell you, some days have been so challenging in finding 5 things that I have to sit there for over a half an hour thinking of the last thing, and it may be the blade of grass that was blowing in the wind. I don't even care what it is, but after all these months, I still have to ground myself every morning and write the 5 things that I'm grateful for. So really think about that and understand that there's so much we can't control in the world, but what we can control is what we're grateful for. What we can control is working on these habits, and what we can control is the way we react to situations. So these are things that I'm grateful for. I want to let you know that we will be sending you in a digital copy our JFS gratitude journal that we sent out to, I would say, I think 3,000 people, maybe Katie, you can say if I'm wrong, or 2,000 people, and people are using our gratitude journal, but we wanted to give you one today from us, so you can start your own place where you can be grateful for things every single day. Again, things you can control. These are the things we need that will keep us going every single day. So we just don't want you to forget, and we're gonna send this PowerPoint, and if Jenny and your team can make sure everybody gets it who wants it. But these are the things we want you to remember. To, of course, to keep showing up. Show up every single day. And that may mean to you getting out of bed and finally taking a shower after 2 weeks of maybe not doing that. But whatever way it is, show up. Show up for yourself first, and then you will be able to show up for others. Make connections and find support. Even though you may not be talking with us right now, the chat feature, the things, you are connecting again with other people. So connect with people who need your connection. I love the fact that my mom, and I think JFS Rochester has people who connect over the phone once or twice a week, which is really extremely important. And they don't even know each other. And I think that is still another hugely powerful piece of connection. Use positive self-talk. Let's defeat the negative thinking in our head by reframing, rephrasing things, making sure that we are keeping ourselves as mentally healthy as you want to keep yourself physically healthy during this period of time. That will keep you resilient. And like Christy said, choose to think optimistically. It doesn't mean you need to be overly optimistic during this period of time, because that's not going to be helpful, but be optimistic about what you have. What are the things that are good? Feel gratitude every single day. We can't thank you enough. We had a wonderful time here today. I want to be able to take some questions. Christy and I are here. We're providing you again with some of our additional resources and what you can see that JFS San Antonio is putting out there. We're putting out there some great information, some great research. and education for anybody who wants to understand a little bit more about resilience or taking care of your mental wellness. But it was such an honor and a pleasure to be here today, and we'd love to hear from you.
Don't hesitate to reach out with our contact information if there's anything you want to know more about. And like Tally said, we will be sharing the slides and some of the resources with Jenny so that she can distribute.
Yeah, I'll distribute the PowerPoint, and Tally, you'll send that quote that you read. I know that there were a number of people asking about that, and any other additional, the bullet journal or the gratitude journal, and then we'll send that all out in an email to all the participants. So this was fantastic. I'm looking at the chat, a lot of thank yous, and anyone who